ultimate culmination, a tale of endless ambition, a celebration for the ages. These were the stories that the incredibly talented individuals at Intelligent Systems had been crafting for nearly half a decade. This new golden era for the Fire Emblem franchise had brought something that many had thought impossible: prosperity and respect. Their series had been a niche one, appealing to a core subset of hardcore tactical aficionados, yet driving away the common man due to its impenetrable layers of complexity and ingenuity. Fire Emblem wasn't a series for the faint of heart, but with dire straits comes a change in values, and change it did. Stories were altered to appeal to a wider audience. Mechanics were introduced that changed the very fabric of how people played the game, and sometimes they became drunk on their own ambition, crafting narratives and worlds that were just infeasible with their own manpower and skill sets. Make no mistake, Fire Emblem was here to stay. However, the state it was in left something to be desired. They had entered into the sacred halls of Nintendo's finest franchises, yet still couldn't compete on their level. They needed something fresh, something bold, something that would blow everyone away while still fitting in with their standards of the day. But maybe, just maybe, they were looking in the wrong place the whole time. The answer to all of their problems existed far away in their forgotten past, in a world and a story that had almost been lost to time, and an adventure that hit close to home. With the success of Fire Emblem Fates on their backs, even if many were left unsatisfied by the experience, Intelligent Systems went forward, determined to continue this trend. The Fire Emblem Renaissance had only just begun, and they were determined not to disappoint yet again. With the surprise announcement at the beginning of the year, it seemed the year of Fire Emblem was about to commence. But as with any story, or video game for that matter, the starting point of their latest creations began right after their latest release. Post-Fire Emblem Fates, Hitoshi Yamagami was throwing around ideas for the next great entry to the franchise. At first, he thought that Nintendo's secretive console, the Nintendo Switch, would be their next conquest. Fire Emblem felt right at home on handhelds, and the added power of the console would allow the team to do new and exciting things that just weren't possible on the 3DS. However, he needed a title to come out much sooner than the console's release date, a title meant to act as a buffer until the Switch was ready for release. And Yamagami wanted it to release in the final quarter of 2016. Releasing a brand new Fire Emblem title with the same polished gameplay and story in that amount of time was just absurd. Thankfully, a couple of passionate team members convinced him of a project that just might work. A remake of a long-forgotten title that had been labeled the black sheep of the entire franchise. A remake of Fire Emblem Gaiden. These developers wanted to combine many of the ideas that they had never gotten a chance to implement in Fates into Gaiden's vastly different gameplay concepts. Gaiden had been lost to the public eye, and the majority of titles from the series past had all but been forgotten by the millions of new fans brought in with their latest entries. So, a history lesson seemed appropriate to Yamagami, and, conveniently, it would be ready in time for the game's 25th anniversary. But they needed to get started on development immediately if they were to ever hope to release the remake on time. The months of pre-planning and decision-making would have to be rushed if they ever hoped to meet the September deadline they set for themselves. a ludicrous date that they quickly retracted and revised. But this rush job came with several cravats, as many of their co-workers were hard at work on Fire Emblem Heroes and the eventual Switch title that would catapult the series forward into the next generation. They couldn't necessarily be picky with whomever worked on the project. Some were a given, like series producers Masahiro Higuchi and Hitoshi Yamagami, along with composers such as Takeru Kanazaki and Yasuhisa Baba. Others sought to take the project as a chance to try something new. Take the character designer. Instead of using the tried and true works of Yusuke Kusaki, Toshiyuki Kusakihara, one of the game's directors, insisted that they hire Hidari. Kusakihara had wanted to work with him for years, but their schedules just couldn't line up. Until now. Hidari's artwork exuded a certain charm that made characters even more endearing, and even though the groundwork was already there for every single character, the majority lacked any personality. The rest of Gaiden had suffered from this as well. A symptom of the time, many of the key plot points and realizations were locked away in the manual and not in the game proper due to the Famicom's many limitations. A great story was hidden underneath and only needed to be unearthed for all to see. They needed someone to help lead the team. Someone with an intricate knowledge of the source material. Someone who could dedicate themselves to unveiling this hidden gem to the world. That someone was Kenta Nakanishi. A relatively unknown member of Nintendo, Nakanishi had been working in the background ever since his start in 2009, first as a simple debugger, then later on Xenoblade Chronicles, helping one of the most important video games in history to get a Western localization. After working on some of the series' main titles and becoming a subdirector on Fates, Nakanishi finally had the connections to speak with the driving forces behind Fire Emblem, a franchise that was near and dear to him. As a young boy, he was introduced to the series by his father, a major fan in his own right, teaching him how to play and getting him hooked on the series. The two would play the original Shadow Dragon and Gaiden for hours on end. This time he spent with his father didn't last, unfortunately. Just around the release of Mystery of the Emblem, his father passed away, leaving him only with the memories of the fun times they had. Laying his father to rest with a copy of Mystery of the Emblem, he continued playing the series for years to come. Later on, while sorting through his personal effects, he found 2 cartridges of Shadow Dragon and Gaiden that he played with his father long ago. Nakanishi reminisced about the times the two had spent together, which only strengthened his bonds with the games. He told this story to Yamagami and Higuchi, and they hired him on the spot. It just felt right to them. With his vast knowledge of the series and his emotional attachment to Gaiden, Nakanishi seemed like a perfect match. Nakanishi led the Nintendo side of things, but what about Intelligent Systems? Well, Kusakihara decided to be the one to step up onto the plate, intrigued by Gaiden's unconventional gameplay. With directors in tow, production was a go, though they already had a strong idea of what they wanted to do at the beginning. From the outset of the project, the directors and producers alike had several goals they wanted to reach by the tail end of the production. The most pressing matter at hand was Gaiden itself, and specifically its difficulty. Fire Emblem Gaiden was renowned as one of the most difficult titles in the series, but it wasn't only because of your opponents on the battlefield. Character growth rates were stingy at best, offering 1 or 2 stat boosts each level, and if you lose enough units you won't even be able to finish the game. It was brutal to say the least. Brutal enough that it could alienate their current fan base if they went down that route. To alleviate these concerns, they upped the growth rates to modern standards, tweaked some things with weapon accuracy, and added in other iconic innovations like the support system. The volume-like difficulty options, and the option to enable casual mode didn't hurt either. The team at Intelligent Systems wanted to introduce classic Fire Emblem to a new audience, and this was just the tip of the iceberg. The story was a hard sell as it was. It had no clear theme. Its characters either dominated the narrative or said only 1 or 2 lines that were instantly forgotten afterwards. And when the game switched between Celica and Ulm, it could be jarring to say the least. Everything just needed some clarification. Characters needed to have personalities instead of cookie-cutter archetypes. A clear narrative through line had to be developed, and everything in the manual had to be shoved into the final project. No one was going to look through a manual in this day and age. But what was Gaiden's theme throughout it all? What was Shozo Kaga trying to get at back in the day? A confrontation of opposites, of differing ideologies and values between the main characters and their enemies. This dichotomy is also what made Celica and Alm's journeys, and in turn, their respective armies conflict with one another. Alm's path is one of power, seeking to end the war by force. Celica, on the other hand, stands on the side of love and compassion and seeks to end the war in her own way. Everything in the story is defined by these opposing values, providing a thrilling narrative in theory. With the advancements of today, though, it was all but a reality. There were just a couple things out of place, though, namely a group of compelling characters to follow. Giving them more personality and a larger role in the story was one thing they could do. However, the team wanted to take it one step further and add full-on voice acting to the series for the first time. This added a layer of depth that just wasn't possible with lines of text. To truly convey tense moments, happy moments, or those that can fluctuate in emotion at a moment's notice, voice acting was absolutely necessary. Gaiden also had sort of an image problem ever since its release, meaning side story in Japanese. Many were confused as to what the side story in it was for, so keeping the name as it is just wasn't going to cut it. At first, they thought about calling it New Gaiden, like New Mystery of the Emblem. However, the presence of Gaiden or paralogue chapters further complicated things, so the idea was scrapped on the spot. Still, they wanted to keep the feeling of the game being a remake. For this reason, they looked into popular Japanese naming conventions at the time, such as RE for remake, or using Saito, meaning once again, or second time, or even just a simple G at the end of the Fire Emblem moniker. These were great concepts in their own right, but they just weren't clicking with the team's vision for the project. Somewhere amidst their ramblings, though, they found their answer. Echoes.
On an ocean of stars.
A simple, yet fitting name. It befitted the mission of the game to have their classic titles echo back to their modern audience and let them see just how much the series had changed, as well as how much it has remained the same over all these years. Echoes was all about honoring the Fire Emblem franchise's storied past and keeping it alive for future generations. A noble goal, to say the least. While the majority of people involved in the original title either left the company or pursued other interests within it, the brilliant group of individuals who inherited the franchise's legacy, and this one little game in particular, were more than up to the task. And the results of that task have yet to be determined.
But when my name has been lost to the grave, I will sustain you year after year. I will protect you when dangers appear.
Hello everyone, Lockstin here with some bad news. This is going to be a two-parter yet again. And no, this isn't because we're lazy or just want more of that good old YouTube ad money. No, it's because we have no idea what the fate of Echoes is, what people think of it, how it affected them, how it changed the landscape of Fire Emblem as we know it, or didn't at all. And also, sales. Yes, sales. Now, while we can skip the sales, we want to give this one a little breathing room. Give it just a little bit of time to grow. So in 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, depending on when we think we have enough to finish this video for good, then we'll release part 2, fix everything in part 1, put it all together with our videos on Fates, Heroes, and Tokyo Mirage sessions, and finally release the second part of our feature-length documentary on the series. Who knows? Maybe come the fall, when Fire Emblem Warriors comes out, we might even combine the two into the Lord of the Rings length runtime it was meant to be. In the meantime, we'll have some interesting videos for you on Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles, and the definitive history behind Tales of Fantasia. Heck, you can even come over to my channel, right here, to check out some other theories and maybe a Fire Emblem video, or, well, just one Fire Emblem video at the moment. But anyway, thanks for watching, and make sure to continue that thirst for knowledge.